All right. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to another future focused weekly update where we're bridging business technology and human experience with the stated goal of keeping you 10 steps ahead. One of these days, I'm going to get the intro consistent and you won't hear a different one every time, but maybe that's kind of the fun part. I'm looking forward to this week's, as I always do. This is honestly one of the highlights of my weeks. So hopefully for those of you who listen, watch, however you're consuming it, you find this helpful. If you do, please like, share, tell a friend, give it a rating, all those fun things. And if this is your first, hey, share some feedback because I do these for the benefit of those who are listening and watching. And I love to hear from folks what works, what doesn't, what I can do to continually improve in the spirit of continuous improvement. As I usually do, I've got 5 on the rundown today. We'll see if I get to all 5. But I figure why not? And with that, let's just jump straight into it. So if you have not been paying attention to AI, which if you're listening to my podcast, you probably do, but you might have missed this. OpenAI has been talking about their advanced voice mode for a while, which what this is, it's new in the sense that the capability is new. Being able to talk to your generative AI tool versus just type isn't new, but this new advanced voice mode is, and it's been in the works. It's been in beta. I've had a chance to play around with it in beta a little bit. Now it's officially out there and they're starting to roll this out. So if you are a pro user, I check it out. You'll see down, if you hit the little microphone button, it tells you, now you can get access to it. And if you don't have it yet, it's just because it hasn't gotten to you. But I want to talk about this because this is actually a fairly central theme for today's conversation. And once you get it, you'll see it. This is the one that Scarlett Johansson got into it with OpenAI for allegedly cloning her voice without her consent and all this other stuff. And so what this is it really allows you to have this anthropomorphic capability with your AI in surprising real time for a lot of purposes. Now, to give a little bit of the experience, now when you go in and you kick this thing off, it'll ask you, hey, which voice do you want? And you get to pick, there's male and female voice choices and then energy and styles. I personally am a fan of Spruce. So I went with Spruce, who is calm and affirming. And that's the voice I went with. I haven't played around with it enough to know if there's actually a performance difference based on it, but it has to do with the style of how you're interacting with it. And I'll say the latency of this thing is pretty impressive. It does not feel robotic, like talking to something where you got to wait for it to finish and then there's a lag period and then you can ask another thing and it doesn't really connect the conversation. So this advanced AI voice that's coming has some very human-like capabilities for it. Now, one of the things that's been interesting in reading articles about, and even just talking to people in general, when I ask people that I encounter, have you had a chance to actually have a conversation with your AI bot yet? I would say the vast majority of people are still like, what? Like, no, I have not. But there is a growing number of people who are starting to experiment with this kind of stuff. I would say it's still in kind of this early stage where people don't really quite know what to do with it. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about it for those who may be just completely unfamiliar with, like, what is this? To those who may be familiar, but haven't really experimented with it. Because I see, like with many things, I see some pretty powerful use cases and helpful ways to use this. I also see some neutral ways to use this. And I also see some pretty hazardous ways where this could cause some real problems. And honestly, the marketing and some of the things being put out there right now give me cause for concern. Because of course, marketing wants to get you hooked on things that may not necessarily always be in your best interest. But if you haven't seen it, that's the basics of what it is. And we're going to talk about AI voice in my next update too. But I'd encourage you, if you're an OpenAI ChatGPT Pro user, play around with it. See what you think. I will say most people, when I talk to them about their first experiences, they're like, I didn't really know what to do with it. But if you see some of the marketing, they're like, oh, now you can have a friend when you're commuting to work. And I'm like, oh boy, I don't know about this. So I want to highlight some of the examples that I think if you're going, hey, I hear about this now, sounds kind of interesting. Christopher, I don't want to use it for something that may cause problems for me, but I do want to experiment with it. I figured I'd give some use cases and things that I can think can be really productive things for people where I don't see necessarily negative consequences unless you develop an emotional attachment to spruce and suddenly that goes sideways for you. But I think one of the biggest ones is human simulation. Now, not human replacement, but truly where you go, I need to practice something with a human like being that isn't really a human before I do this. And you may go, when do I really need to do this? But as somebody who is in lots of conversations related to job activity, interviewing is a really, really great use case for this. If you're somebody who gets uncomfortable with interviewing or even small talk, this is an actual really powerful tool for that because it will take down your defenses of, oh, this is socially awkward, because it's socially awkward to do it in real time in a live situation. If you walk into an interview, that's a high stress situation. You walk up to a random stranger on the street and try and drum up small talk, or at a conference or whatever. That's an uncomfortable, high pressure situation. Doing that with Spruce, your AI bot, no consequences whatsoever. And I actually think I would encourage people to try something like this, but you have to do it the right way. And I think this is the part that will be helpful for folks if you're considering this is, let's say you want to practice for an interview, or let's say you want to practice small talk because you know you're going to an event and this isn't necessarily your comfort zone. And so you want to practice it. Let's run through those use cases, and hopefully then somebody can say, hey, I tried it and it actually really helped. Because I can tell you, I find this stuff helpful. But let's say you've got an interview. The thing is, you don't just want to open Spruce and just start talking to it because it's not going to have any context. You got to remember, AI is not some all-knowing, all-powerful being. It doesn't know what's going on. You have to set context. So if you're going to do something like this, you need to tell it what you're about to embark on and the role you want it to play. Because if you don't, it's not going to have context. So in this hypothetical situation, if you want to practice for a job interview, when you open advanced voice mode, you would need to say, hey, here's what I'm looking to do. Here's the role I would like you to play. Here's kind of the environment. I'm planning on interviewing for this company for this role. This is the kind of thing. I'd like you to play the role of this person who would be interviewing me. And then I'd like to practice what that interview could go like. And they will confirm back with you, what you're doing and all this stuff. And then you have to kind of trigger it. And then you also, I would encourage you to say, when we're done, I'd like to end the simulation and then discuss with you some feedback and things like that along the way. So basically, you need to think this through. You can't just be like, all right. And I'm telling you, if you just pick up your phone and just start talking to Spruce and pretend you're interviewing, you're going to send me a message and go, Christopher, that was a dumpster fire. That was not helpful at all. And it's because you didn't set it up. So make sure you think through this a little bit before you do it. Don't just open your app and start going. Think through, what is the environment? What is the context in which I'm doing this? Why? What am I hoping to get out of this? What kinds of things am I looking for? Or are there any specific, if there's specific interview questions, you want to make sure that they practice with you. Make sure you say those things. If there's things you're uncomfortable with, make sure you let it know, like, hey, I really want to practice this. You have to set this up. And I think this is where, when I talk to some people who are like, I played around with it, I didn't really get much value out of it. I think this is the part that they're often missing, because I've toyed with it. And when you do this and say, I want you to take on this persona, this is what I'd like to do. This is how I'd like it to go. This is about the length that I want this to go. And then when we're done, I want you to do this, and I want to engage in a feedback session. It's extremely powerful. Now, here's where people may listen to this and freak out. Am I suggesting you never have a need to engage with a human being in practicing for this stuff? No, not at all. I think in many ways, you still need that, because there's a different dynamic when it comes to interacting with a real human being. Because I can tell you, in this voice simulator, you're not going to end up striking a unique conversation about your favorite place to go get drinks, or like, that's not going to go there. And I think that is an important part of human experience. So you need to be very focused, which is what AI is really good for. You have a focused task, a focused activity that you want support on. There you go. But I would encourage you to do this. I've had other people who have told me it's really great for language practice. Again, another good thing, but you got to make sure you set up context. So if you're planning on engaging with your advanced voice mode and you're like, hey, I'm practicing having a conversation in Spanish, and because I'm traveling to XYZ country, so please, I'm also looking for you to look, do I have the right lingo? Am I using the right accent? Things like that. I'd like feedback on that. Set it up before you engage in the conversation. But once you start thinking this way, you will start to unlock like, oh, okay, now I can see where this could be really helpful. I can see how this could actually better me as a human being versus be a catchy, cheesy thing that I go, yeah, I did it once and it wasn't really all that useful to me. So again, my reaction and caution though, not again, I hadn't said this part. My reaction and caution to this is, please, if you start leveraging this, which I do think interaction with voice is going to continue to rise and grow, and I think this is going to become much more normal for how we interact with AI, just be very careful that there is an emotional, cognitive side of you because we are human and you are now interacting in a more human way. It will become much easier to develop an emotional attachment. And the data's there. This isn't just Christopher saying this. The data's there. And it's risky because, so that's where the marketing examples, hey, now you have a friend to talk to on your drive. I don't know that that's a good use case for it. I would encourage you to call a friend instead. Call a real person, for somebody you need to catch up with. I see how many people are lonely. It's like, when's the last time you called your best friend or checked in with somebody? Send them a text, be like, hey, I drive every day on this day. Is there a day we can catch up? Do that. Don't build a bond with Spruce from your AI app. That's going to lead you down dark places. It's not, I would just say anything that you would go, I'm looking to replace a human interaction, pull back. Okay. But pretty cool. You have access to it if you're a pro user. It does say there's limitations in how much you can do. So like if you're thinking of having a 3-hour, whatever, I'm actually debating, and actually I'd love feedback from all of you. I'm actually debating experimenting with this and seeing if I can't actually do a podcast episode with AI and just interact with it. And I don't want to do it on a regular basis. That'd be kind of weird to have Spruce as my co-host. But just to see how it goes and see where it goes. So let me know if that'd be something interesting or if it'd be something where you'd be like, I have zero desire whatsoever to hear you talk to AI for an extended period of time. All right, moving on. MetaConnect 2024. Couple things this week on Meta. But MetaConnect was a big event that happened. I don't know if it was last week or this. It was recent. And Zuckster was up there talking about the latest developments and all the things that they're doing. And honestly, Meta is, I think, one of the most undervalued AI players in the space. Everybody's talking about OpenAI and Anthropic and, Gemini and all these other things. Llama does not get the credit that I think it should. It is an impressive model. It is impressive what they're able to do, and seeing its capability at MetaConnect was really impressive, to say the least. If you haven't seen some of the highlights, I'd encourage you to do that. But one of the things related to my previous point is the Zuckster is betting big on AI voice. He is very clear that he sees that being the future of how we interact with AI. I think it's going to take up a much larger market share of our interaction with AI. I don't know that I'm quite to the point he's at. Maybe in the distant future. I just know people's behavioral tendencies. And while like a Zuckerberg, that may be totally cool and normal for him, I still know a lot of people where the idea of talking to AI is still a bit uncomfortable, and they wouldn't necessarily consciously or cognitively choose to do it. But the way the tech's going, it's definitely possible. Now, there were some pretty cool things that they're doing with AI voice that was really impressive. One, just from a content creator space, that's really interesting, is they're pairing multiple AI things together for translation purposes, which is pretty neat. So in theory, not in theory, now in practice, I could record this as is. And then if I wanted to make a version of this that's in Spanish, Chinese, French, Italian, Latin, Aramaic, like whatever, I could do it. And it would not only take my voice, make me speak perfect, language in that voice, translate it, but it would also change my lips and face so that I'm actually speaking in that, or at least giving the appearance of speaking in that voice, which I think is pretty powerful in terms of as we think about content accessibility, things like that. I also see it contributing to a lot of noise, and it's going to make really powerful, good information go further. It's also going to make really powerful, bad, destructive information go further. So again, do I see it as good or bad? I think it's a powerful capability that's going to be in all of our hands very soon. And I think that can be helpful as we look at content, because I can tell you, having worked in big global organizations, translation and accessibility for folks in different countries and languages is extremely time consuming and costly. So the fact that we can do this on the fly now, of course, the example they used in MetaConnect was like, an influencer doing a cooking show, they got their cooking clip can be in 37 different languages. I don't necessarily know if that's really the most valuable use of this kind of stuff, but kind of cool, kind of catchy. And hey, if you can do it, I guess why not? I've got my reasons why you may not want to. But anyway, that said, he's also, like I said, he's betting big on the AI voice. And he, it was impressive what they did. So their AI voice was on par or close with OpenAI's advanced voice mode, which they've been hinting at for a long time and saying, we got this, we can do all this. And then Zuckster comes out of nowhere and is like, boom, hey, check it out. You can interact with our AI voice in real time using any of our stuff. And one of the things that was pretty cool about it, and it doesn't surprise me, Meta got away with this, OpenAI didn't. Meta actually struck deals with big names for their voices. So, like one of the ones the kids and I are big fans of is Aquafina. Aquafina's got an amazing voice. It's a familiar, and it's something, we all would be, you hear it and you're like, oh, sweet. And you can talk to that voice and it sounds like that voice. Now, what I don't know, and I think this is where I get a little leery when I see this, is does it actually bring with it the personality, or is it just their voice? And I guess if you're a stage actor, having your voice used as just kind of a front for anything could feel very harmless. I will say people's voice and likenesses suddenly being attached to AI voice, it does make me a little bit nervous. And as I was watching MetaConnect, from the stage, it's all fun and it's all, who won't this be cool? Like, now you can talk to Aquafina and it's no big deal and she'll engage in a conversation with you. But if it's not really Aquafina, I already had hesitations around AI likenesses of people, and I've warned people, hey, be careful. You create, because I had somebody who learned the hard way, the very hard way. They made an AI likeness of themselves and sold it. You could subscribe to it so that you could get advice from them, and it went sideways quick. I shared stories of this happening with some influencer stuff. And so I think there's already some dangers, and that's if it's trained on that person's data and personality and likeness. Now you're slapping somebody's voice on basically anything. I I think we're going to see some problems with this. My prediction is we're going to see some problems with this. And of course, that's not what's being said from the stage. Probably for the same reason when Facebook launched, the like button was seen as this universally positive thing. Isn't it going to be great now when you share content, people can like it? Come to find out decades later, it's leading to depression and social anxiety and all these other things like, oh, wow, we never considered that. So as I was watching this AI voice of look at all these people now you can make your AI become, it's all fun and games. I will say part of me went, I think that there's going to be some serious repercussions with this. So to the same concern that I shared before, please, folks, as you start interacting with voice more, be really careful because you may not even realize that you're starting to develop an emotional dependency or emotional bond with this. And now with these voices having actual familiar faces and names, like Aquafina, you think you're talking to Aquafina, you've watched enough kid movies or whatever, you may actually have in your head who you're talking to, and now you're engaging with them. It's only going to exacerbate the risk of emotional dependency. So just be careful. The other one that, again, I was like watching going, cool. Oh, but this feels like another one that we're going to see some long-term repercussions is their image modification capability was banger. Like it was impressive what they were doing with like, hey, here's a picture of me. Look, I want to change my outfit. I want to be in a different setting. I want to do all this stuff. We can do it in an instant with near perfection. And of course, at MetaConnect, it's going to be framed as all entertainment. It's all going to be wonderful. It's going to be so much fun and games. And what could possibly go wrong with this? And I see us moving into an age already where we don't even know what we believe anymore because is what we see even real? But I think about the impact that can have on us when we start modifying our own realities to be a little more like what we wish it had been instead of what it really was. And how does that affect us? If we take all our family vacation photos and go, you know what? I like these photos, but now we're not just like tweaking the hue and the contrast and maybe brightening the colors. Now we're actually physically modifying our memories with AI so that when we look back at the picture 10 years from now, we don't really remember if what we're looking at is what actually happened and the actual outfit we wore or the actual environment where we were in, or was that the AI version that we wish it had been? And how does that affect us? And one of the things that's happening right now that I see this playing out in unhealthy ways is, Hurricane Helene has been just catastrophic. And if you haven't been following that, like, just take a look at the damage that it's had unexpectedly. Like some of the least damage is on the coast and it's like annihilated other parts of the US. And one of the things, there's this rising trend of people wanting to make their images of it more clickbaity. And so they're adding animals into the pictures, stuck on the roof, and they're adding people suffering, looking, and it's like, we're taking a tragic event and hyping it up to intensify it for more clicks and like this kind of stuff is going to have a dramatic effect on society. And so we're seeing this on a macro level already with deepfake stuff. But now we're seeing the tech start to personalize this to the point where, hey, didn't like that vacation? It was rainy when you were there that day. Screw your memories. Let's just reimagine them so that the memories you look back on can be how you wish it had been. And I think I see the temptation. Life is hard. It doesn't always go according to plan, but in some ways, that's what makes it beautiful. And I think what AI is promising is saying, well, why live in that world? Why not just live in the world you wish it could be? And I think that's a world that sounds good on paper, but it's going to have real consequences for us in the long run. So I'll talk more about each of those as I see more examples of this stuff to come up. But that's my early prediction on those things. So hold me accountable. Let's see what happens. In the meta news, the other big thing that was actually pretty cool, another one that I think is pretty cool, Meta Orion. If you have not seen this thing, it's a pair of, I would say they're a hybrid AR VR glasses. And they're pretty cool. They look like some pretty dorky Coke bottle glasses. So, I don't know that they're going to be a style that's in, but good news is they aren't going to be available for public consumption anyway. But they're powerful and they are exactly where I thought the trajectory of AR, XR, or XR tech was going. Before you had, there was AR stuff and then there was VR stuff, and you had to have two devices. And we've all seen the Apple Vision Pro and what that looked like. And we've seen these massive VR headsets and super powerful and immersive, yet also very isolating and, not comfortable. And now where we're getting to is now these wearables are bringing the HD capability of VR and layering it in with the real world, creating an AR experience, augmented reality alongside virtual reality. And these were pretty cool. I watched a thing with it from a guy from The Verge. He had a hands-on thing. He was hanging out with the Zuckster. And then Adam Savage is another creator my kids and I really enjoy. And he had hands-on with it. And I'll say the technology is impressive. And now, just so you know, don't go looking to pre-order this thing. They've announced, they made it clear they are not making these available for public consumption. This is going to be more of an early beta that they plan on creating something that'll go to market in the next few years. But this is a big shift. And I have a sneaking suspicion we're going to see Meta slowly back away, because they did announce, if you didn't notice it, they announced they're not going to continue with the Meta Quest Pro. They were going to kind of create the Apple Vision competitor, and they kind of said, eh. When they came out with Orion, I was like, oh, yeah, because they're going to just skip that whole clunky step and just jump right to this hybrid thing. In terms of where this is going, depending on who I talk to, some people are convinced we're only a few years out from literally everybody walking around with these augmented glasses that are basically, a phone glued to your face, but you can still interact with reality. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know whether I actually am there yet. Because I still think, and here's my thoughts on why I don't know that people will go there. As addicted to smartphones as people are, one of the things that I think actually makes it more addictive, and why they've become so prevalent, and why they're literally, you never see anybody without it in their hands, is because in our minds, we go, well, but I can put it down. And so we like to tell ourselves, yeah, it's not really addictive. I'm not hooked on my phone, because see, look at me putting it down. And it's harder to cross that cognitive disconnect when the device is literally on your face. And if you look at the trajectory of wearables in general, it's a very different trajectory than other types of tech. Let's just take smartwatches. Okay, are they much more ubiquitous now? Yes. But that's because, one, they went through a lot of bumps and bruises along the way. They've adapted. There was a time where people said nobody's going to use a smartphone anymore because they're just going to have their watch. And that's going to be the be all, end all, whatever. And they're just going to have it with them all the time. And what I just observed and heard through conversations and some of the data was, people actually didn't want their smartwatch or their smart wearable to be their phone for the reasons I described. They didn't want to feel like they were addicted to this thing that was attached to their body. They wanted to do it for things that added value, for tracking data, for maybe notifications that send you back to the device that, yeah, I can put it down. I can put it down. Oh, ding. Oh, I got to go grab it. Right? But I'm in control of the whole thing. They were more comfortable. And once the wearables started figuring that out, we started seeing more things with like, hey, if it's related to health, if it's related to more notifications, keeping you in the know, people are all for that. If this is now the thing that I use as my primary device, people were more uncomfortable with that being attached to their body. And so I think that's going to be one of the biggest hurdles, things like Meta Orion and other devices that are claiming to, hey, you don't need to have a TV anymore because now your glasses can just project the TV in front of you. And I think you're going to have that same thing where people are like, well, yeah, but I can turn off the TV. I mean, I'm hooked on it. I don't really turn it on, but I could. At any point, I could. And so I think it's going to be an interesting mix to see where these things go, because that's been my experience with wearables, especially in the VR AR space, is they have a very difficult adoption curve. And I think that tendency in our human behavior is a big part of it. And I don't know that they've quite figured out their niche yet. And to anybody who's ever watched or talked to somebody or been someone who's tried to do stuff in VR, it can be a very isolating experience. So just because you throw it in a pair of glasses where you can still see the real world, the experience you're having is still very lonely, because nobody else can experience what you're experiencing. And so, yes, in theory, if everybody's wearing the glasses, it's a shared experience. Now you're talking about a tech footprint where literally everybody has to be having the glasses and keyed in on the same experience for that to happen. And I think we've just got a ways to go, which might be why, despite how cool the tech is, Zuckerberg's not just like going, we're going big, we're going to sell these for, $4.99 to everybody, because I think he knows we're not quite there yet. But it's another reason why he's so big on voice, is when you start thinking about this, your ability to interact with it. Now, granted, it's a little wearable wristband that can detect your finger movements based on, your tendons and on muscle movements. It's pretty cool. So if you haven't gone and watched a video of the Orion, highly encourage it. But I'd actually be curious your thoughts on, is this something you would just run out and buy, or would you be more like, oh, yeah, no, I don't know, kind of weird. All right, speaking of weird, let's transition again. I have not, kicked the hornet's nest of the robot overlords coming to your door in a while. But this past week, I was watching an update on kind of the latest in humanoid robots. And I got to tell you, at least when the robots show up at your door to drag you into the street, you're going to have your choice of which one you want to do it based on this update. And joking aside, I actually am really impressed with how far humanoid robots have come in. We're not even through 2024 and the advancements in this. There's the Figure AI 02 now that's out. There's the Fourier GR2. There's the 1X Technologies Neo. There's the Boston Dynamics Atlas. There's the Tesla Bot next generation. I mean, these things are like popping off all over the place. And I will say, they haven't fully eliminated the creepy factor. You look at these things moving around and you're kind of like, boy, if that thing was walking around my house, I don't know how comfortable I would feel. But they're coming in a long ways in terms of making them more approachable. And, they got these soft outer covers that make them huggable, I guess. And I was watching one, I can't remember if it's the GR2 or the Neo, that I was watching this video, and it's like they're training these things to be. Now, there's different use cases. So let's talk about use cases here, because it's all over the map. And so you might go to like the Tesla Bot and go, Christopher, what are you talking about? Like, that's clearly they've got an industrial plan for what they want to do with that. Or Figure AI's 02. All I saw was this thing in like a manufacturing floor doing stuff. Yes, there's a wide range of use cases, and each one of these AI humanoid robot companies is going down their own unique pathway. So let's talk about some of these use cases that are starting to emerge. And for folks who are going, oh my gosh, the robots are taking over human jobs, I'm actually really impressed, even in a lot of the marketing stuff and some of even just the reactions from people. I think people are recognizing like, these aren't coming for human workers anytime soon. And not only just because anytime soon the technology is not there, just the way they work and the value they add is not necessarily human related. I think most people would look at what they're doing and go, good, finally. Like, we've needed people to do this. It was the job we all dreaded. And now we've got a robot that can take care of it so we can focus on some other things. So for the folks who hear the humanoid robot thing and think, oh my gosh, is this a threat to jobs? I actually think even the companies are recognizing that that's not really where they're going to fit in, at least not the jobs that really are distinctly human. Might there be some remaining, purely automation jobs or things like that might possibly, and quite frankly, the generations of these robots I'm seeing in 2024 already, I'm like, well, they may not be that far out, and they're already implementing them in a number of manufacturing floors. So if you are somebody in that space who's seen one of these things walking around, let me know. I've got a episode dropping at the end of this month with somebody who specializes in humanoid robot development. They're an engineer on these, and we talked at length about some of this stuff. So check that one out. But where we're seeing it, the space race for space exploration and where we can go with that is pushing hard. And honestly, the robots, and I'm not laughing about this. I am laughing, but like in a sad, tragic laugh. The poor people who are stuck on the space station, okay? It's a perfect example of why there's really so much potential value in humanoid robots for space exploration and space activity. Because, hey, if somebody's going to get stuck in space, or if a space shuttle is going to blow up in outer space, wouldn't we rather have humanoid robots be on that than human beings? Now, granted, going back to the job loss, might there be some humans who are a little bit unnerved by the fact that robots might be doing some of that work? Maybe, but I would even wager a bet that, especially the two stuck on the space station, they probably would have much rather had a humanoid robot sent up there so they didn't have to spend the better part of a year stuck in space because we couldn't get a rocket up there to bring them home. And so I think that's one big area of focus, is how can we develop these? That's a major sector where the humanoid robots are going. Labor shortages is a huge one right now. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about job shortages and people not having, jobs, and it's tragic, but it's not because there's a lack of work. And I think that's one of the biggest disconnects companies need to work through, is the fact that it's not that there's not enough work to be done. It's that companies have not only this major disconnect, but we tend to be like, well, but I've only ever done this, so I'm looking for that job, instead of going, yeah, but couldn't you do all these different things? What if we put you in something different than what you've always done? And people are uncomfortable with it, but it's not just people's fault. Companies don't know what to deal with it. I can tell you, being unemployed and talking to people all the time, a lot of times they don't know what to do with me, because they're like, well, we don't really have a full-time role that fits your persona or capabilities. I'm like, are you serious? But the work needs to get done. You just acknowledged the work needs to get done. So this is where I think there is some risk that organizations may over-index on robots, but the reality is there's more work to be done than there are people on the planet. And with our population rate declining, this problem is only going to get worse as people continue retiring. So that's another area that this is heavily being looked into, is how can it augment this, especially in high risk or highly repetitive areas, which still exist. We'd like to think like every manufacturing floor is fully automated now. It's not. And there's a lot of very robotic activity that's still happening from people, where people could focus on other things rather than that. And I think that's where, yes, is there some job loss risk? Potentially. But I think if we as people adapt and companies adapt, there's still more work to be done than there is people. So I wouldn't worry about that. The other one that is really interesting is in home use, almost kind of more of this. Wouldn't it be great to have a robot take care of all these activities that you hate doing, like folding your laundry, which family of 10 here, believe me, we got no shortage of it. I would gladly buy a robot that would wash our clothes and dry them and fold them and put them away. Like, that alone is a full-time job at our house. So that's another market they're going into. That one I think is a little further out. Again, going back to just what I know about people maybe being a little more uncomfortable. I think you're going to see these start to pick up in the wealthy, the elite, who can afford to pay 50 grand to have a robot clunk around their house and take care of some of the stuff. And then healthcare is another big one, where, the use of some of the things we've got shortages in these areas where they go, we don't have enough healthcare workers. And a lot of healthcare work is very robotic. And so there's some real value in having these humanoid robots who can take care of some of this stuff. So pretty cool to see where it's going. A little unnerving, but to me, I actually feel more comfortable with this sector of AI and robotics not going off the rails than some of the other areas. Because to me, this one, there's just too much risk associated with it, and people see that risk. And so they have to mitigate it, because they know if a robot goes off the chain and it's got a hydraulic or electric motor that can lift 1,000 pounds, you don't want that thing accidentally swinging and taking somebody's head off. So there's just a lot more detail and risk that has to be regulated, and they know that. Versus things like, look, we made image modification app on everybody's phone. You can make your memories be whatever you want them to be. Who cares? Like, it's a little easier to just do that without any thought versus robotics. So I actually have less concerns about these robotic pieces than some of the other ones, but pretty cool. It's amazing to see how they're moving from hydraulics to electric motors and how that's changing the potential and the capacity of these things and even the size and mobility. I mean, honestly, if you have not gone and looked at humanoid robots, I'd highly encourage you to do it. I think you'll have your mind blown a bit. Okay, last up, I've got the governor of California. I cannot remember his name off the top of my head, but he vetoed, I think it's 1047, some bill that was out there that was designed to put some accountability on the companies that are developing AI. And it really was around governance and safety measures to make sure the stuff that is being developed is safe, is beneficial, universally okay for humanity. And there were things like there needs to be a kill switch. There needs to be adequate research and development into some of these things. And, it was interesting watching the reactions to the veto, and that, of course, the tech companies are like, no way, we don't want, this is going to slow down innovation. It's going to cost us too much money. And then you had the folks on the other side who were just completely like, this isn't enough. Like, we need to have more. This barely scratches the surface. I read through the major parts of the bill. My personal take on it is I understand why it got vetoed. I don't necessarily agree with why it got vetoed. Now, granted, I understand why tech companies are saying, hey, you're looking at putting legislation, and this legislation is being created by people who don't really understand this stuff. And so they're putting guardrails around things. They don't fully understand the implications. And I mean, some of the implications of these are significant. So I can see tech companies who are already investing billions of dollars into R&D now getting slapped with some additional regulation and safety guidelines that are going to cost them billions more. I can see where they would go, hey, wait a minute, like this is going to slow us down. What I struggle with is, yeah, but is that really a legitimate excuse or reason to say, let's not do this? Now, I am trying to be as empathetic as possible in that I think about times where I've been in organizations and I knew what needed to be done and I had a plan and I knew what I wanted to do, and I got stuck in red tape. There was procurement issues, or I had to go through an IT validation process that was from the 1980s. And it was like, oh my gosh, we were wasting so much. We could have finished this by the time we're even going to get through the first step in the bureaucratic nonsense. And so I understand, and honestly can very much empathize with these tech companies going, are you kidding? If we have this kind of regulation, we'll never be able to do anything. And to be fair, I think one of the things that's a little tough is it does, in some ways, unfairly penalize only the companies who are actually developing the AI. It has zero implications on the people who are using it. So all the burden of this gets dumped on the companies who are actually doing the R&D and research and development. And the companies who can use it basically can still go scot-free with almost zero repercussions should they choose to twist and manipulate what was developed for a purpose that ends up causing absolute destruction. And so I do think there are some fair pushbacks to, hey, can we find a way to balance this so that the burden isn't carried by only a select few and actually distribute this out to create a more holistic accountability? That totally in alignment with, totally in agreement with. I think it is a reasonable ask that, hey, as we look at not only kind of taxing and regulating and putting safety measures in, is there a way that we can distribute that out so that it's not unfairly placed on a select few? Totally reasonable. I would be in complete alignment with greater measures being put in place with that. Not doing this strictly because it slows things down and costs more money, to me, not an acceptable excuse. Not an acceptable excuse whatsoever. And that being kind of the main reason this thing got kind of put down bothers me a bit, because I do look at this and go, do we not, like, have people not yet grasped the power of this thing we've created? And I don't think we have. I really, truly don't think most people understand what we're dealing with and the incredible things, but yet the catastrophic things that can happen if we don't do something to try and regulate and at least put minimum guidelines in place to say, hey, you can't do this. Like, there are certain areas that we just have to. And listen, I know there's going to be people who push back on that. And I've seen it on some of my comments, and I've gotten messages from this before. Well, who decides? Who gets to say that? Honestly, I think this is where we need the most diverse group of people coming together to help define some of this stuff. It shouldn't just be a bunch of bureaucrats who don't fully understand the tech, who are disconnected from many of the implications of this stuff, and aren't involved in the tech companies to know, and who are just influenced by the dollars coming from the tech company for their campaigns. Like, hey, there's too much bias in that. I don't think it should just be the tech companies. They're going to be way too over-indexed on, hey, we need to speed up development. We need to drive down costs. We need to, get this out there as fast as possible. We also don't want it to be decided by just the masses, because I can tell you right now, based on the misunderstandings and just lack of tech acumen for this stuff, we don't want that, because I'm telling you, there are so many incredible, wonderful things that can come from this, that truly, when the tech company goes, hey, you're going to hamstring this, and we may be missing out on cures to diseases. We may be missing out on clean energy. We may be missing out on ways to completely reverse some of the climate issues that we're dealing with right now if we don't move this forward. I think it's being overstated. I think it's being used to try and manipulate and influence people to say, hey, fine, let's just let you do this thing, and not acknowledging the real risk. But they're not wrong when they say that. And so I think if we have people who don't understand all that going, yeah, well, the world would just be better off without AI. I prefer back when we used to do it the good old days. We don't want that. But I think what we need is a healthy distribution of those different groups coming together and going, let's talk through this. But we also need people who are willing to compromise. And I think that's one of the things that watching this has been most frustrating, is that we have this zero-sum attitude when it comes to this stuff. It's like, if I don't get everything I want, then I lost. And so I'm just going to fight for everything I want. And if I can't have that, I am unwilling to move forward. And we see this in politics. We see this in business. We see this in so many things. Instead of saying, yeah, I mean, yes, ideally, of course, do the tech companies want no governance, no regulation, no, taxing on what they're doing? Of course they do. But you can't have companies that go, and until we get that, we're not going to compromise. That's not healthy. We need tech companies who are willing to go, look, we'll take a seat at the table, recognizing that we're going to need to compromise here. And we're willing to meet. But we also need people who don't understand the tech coming in going, I may not understand this, but I'm willing to compromise. I'm willing to bend, and my only outcome is, unless AI is gone and we get rid of it, I'm not even willing to have a conversation. And the same with the bureaucrats. We need the bureaucrats to go, listen, I know how the legal system works. I know how our political system works. And yes, I have an agenda, but I'm willing to work with these other groups on something. And honestly, if we've ever had a need to have people come together for that, this is the time. We've seen society come together for that in rare instances. I think of like nuclear war. Everybody, enemies all aside, kind of came together and went, you know what, we shouldn't do it. Chemical weapons. I mean, there have been times where we've gone, hey, and unfortunately, those are just bad. This one, it's like, it's good and bad. Like, can't we, gosh, we have even more reasons to all hold hands and go, can't we unite around healthy compromise? Like, this could be the best thing that ever happened to society in our lifetimes, or it could end us all. Like, can't we at least agree we probably should work together? But the California bill didn't seem like that's going to happen. So it's going to be interesting to see where regulation goes. And I just really hope we can get some things in place before really, really bad things start happening. And then it's like, well, now it's too late. Like the damage has been done. But time will tell. So with that, I am going to wrap it up. I hope you have found this helpful. I hope you've challenged your thinking. And by all means, reach out. Let me know if there's other things that I can cover, things that come across your desk. I love when I get messages from people going, hey, did you see this? What do you think? But all that, I do this for you. Hopefully you found it helpful. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Friday, wonderful weekend, and we will see you on the other side.